Good morning from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. It's 10:36 a.m. on the 18th of February 2025. It's a lovely morning, bit humid, building up to a storm I think this afternoon maybe. Don't know what the weather forecast is, but it's looking like we might get some rain later. I've just been out and watered the front garden because my poor little dahlia that's courageously pushing itself forward has been eaten by things and looked like it might die of thirst, so gave everything a bit of a watering and a drink, much needed, I must say. So here I am. This is part 3 of Appearances and Disappearances. Thought I'd finish off this chapter since I'd soldiered ahead thus far. So let us begin with reading from 1940 to 1960. I've got my windows and door open. I haven't put the aircon on, but I might have to submit to that. But it didn't seem too unbearable. It's currently 28 degrees, so we'll see how we go, people of Earth. Anyway, let us continue. The casualties of World War II included, of course, the millions of soldiers and civilians who died, and the tens of thousands of orphan children and shell-shocked amnesiacs. Countless others inexplicably disappeared, among them Glenn Miller, Leslie Howard, and other well-known personalities. For adults and children alike, one of the most poignant disappearances was that of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the French aviator and writer whose book The Little Prince, Le Petit Prince, now a classic of gentle fantasy, was published in 1943. Saint-Exupéry charmed and overwhelmed all who knew him with his energy and enthusiasm. The oldest son of a noble family, he threw himself into military flight training in the 1920s and then into civilian mail flights in North Africa and across the Atlantic. His books Night Flight and Wind, Sand and Stars were highly acclaimed. After the fall of France in 1940, he spent 3 years in the United States and then, at 43, and with a left arm disabled by an early plane crash, argued his way into the Free French Air Force and began flying reconnaissance missions over Italy and the Mediterranean. On July 31, 1944, while in radio contact with his base in Corsica, Saint-Exupéry disappeared, perhaps no more mysteriously than the others who had been lost on military missions, but leaving behind a legacy of the romance of flying. Here's a photograph of him sitting in his cockpit. I won't read the blurb because it actually just paraphrases what I just read, so I don't like to repeat things twice, people are there. I will say this only once, yeah! So it gets grinding on my nerves if I have to repeat something. However, part of the aging process is I notice in some of my videos that I'm repeating old stories over and over again, so I'm too guilty of that. But anyway, each time you hear them as if for the first time, sometimes delivered with more verve and exuberance and enthusiasm than ever before, and so it's the same story but delivered in different versions. Oh, smallest violin. Diddly, 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 diddly. Anyway, you have to laugh. As a trusted aide of Adolf Hitler's, Martin Bormann was with him in the Berlin bunker when the dictator and a woman believed to be Eva Braun killed themselves on April 30, 1945. Loyally, Bormann helped take the bodies outside and burn them in the shell-blasted garden. The next night, he and others of the staff made their way through tunnels to a railway station, then walked beside German tanks through the fire-lit streets. One of the group later testified that he had seen Bormann lying on the ground, unwounded, but not breathing. The Nuremberg Wartime Tribunal, unconvinced, sentenced him to death in absentia. Rumours circulated that Bormann had been shot in Denmark while attempting to reach Admiral Karl Dönitz, Hitler's legal successor, that he escaped through the Alps to Italy. Well, he was an ape. He was a Nazi war criminal. They're all fucking apes. On that note, let me show you my wound. It looks no better, but it's moderately better. I'm having to take painkillers for it, which is annoying. Taking arnica to help with the bruising, so I notice the bruising is changing shape and colour, so I'm on the mend. But to my evil motherfuckers that send all this negative and evil to me, remember this: even wounded, I'm more powerful than you could ever imagine in your wildest nightmares. I've just made a post on that on Instagram and Facebook to that effect. Even if I die, babies, I'll come for you, and it will be you and your progeny to the 7th generation. It will never end. Do you understand? Because I came in clean and clear with only good intentions. So you fucked with the wrong woman, babies. Anyway, just need you to know that. Since you can't front me face to face because you're such cowardly dogs, you've heard it from my lips, and God is my witness. Rumours circulated, we read that part, that he escaped through the Alps to Italy, and that a submarine had carried him to South America. Simon Wiesenthal, the well-known pursuer of Nazi war criminals, believes that Bormann had exchanged Nazi loot for false passports and a new identity in Argentina. And then in Chile. Writer Lastilas Farago claimed he visited Bormann in a hospital in Bolivia in 1973. Bormann would be in his 80s today if he is still alive. Bear in mind this book was published in 1982, so he'd be well dead by now. He has the best of reasons for staying out of sight. Like all bullies by nature, when you confront them one-to-one, they slither away like verminous cowards, don't have the courage of their convictions, have to attack you with magic or slippery little sidewinders, cowards and dogs. Oh, you have to laugh. But I must remember not to get too angry or vengeful about it, because they have worms eating into their brain and their death is just as imminent as anyone else's. So all their evil directed at me will only come a perfectly aligned feedback loop right back at them. Mama T doesn't have calamari growing in her brain yet. Just saying, I'd watch it if I were you, fucking with the Tanya. It's only a matter of time. The whole planet's going to go down in a blaze of its own glory, sooner rather than later. I'm not liking what I'm seeing. I've been actively pouring positive, courageous, powerful energy into many of you, and this is how you reward me, huh? Now you will starve of my energy, and you will flail, and you will struggle, and you will rot. And I will not help you unless you show true loyalty and respect and genuine care for me. Because I don't need any of you, really, ever. I came alone, I'll go alone. You need me more than I need you. And here I have been, oh so grateful, thinking I had a family that were willing to protect me and care for me in my older age. No. Well, maybe many of you were initially, but you've been worm-tongued by something or someone eating into your brain. And that is not my fault nor my responsibility to fix. You have to clean your own house, your own mind and your own soul. And by the way, you won't be able to do that under the influence of hefty drugs. Clean mind, clean heart, clean soul. Then you might just have a chance at having a scrap of the power of the Tanya, because I got mine by fighting for myself, clean and clear. Maybe occasionally with a few Jack Daniels on board on the weekends for a bit of fun, but no psych meds, no heroin, no LSD, no ketamine, no whatever the fuck people dabble in these days. I did it all on my own. So quiver in your jocks, boys, and your henchwomen. Jesus H. Christ. Well, they won't help you either, that energy. Never did anything for me. Suffered the little children to come unto me indeed. Right, Mama T has spoken. As I wrote this morning, I don't fear death. I've died many, many times already. Just closing your eyes on one reality and open your eyes in another. What I do fear is the loss of soul, which I've been nourishing some of you with quite intentionally, striving to keep some of you alive. So this is not the time for cowardice. This is the time to stand in your own authority. And if you can't stand with me, then let me go gracefully. I can't abide cowards and bullies. I just can't. Can't respect that. Cowards and bullies. Vermin. And your women that think they're going to destroy me. Think again, girlfriends. Why would I want your men when they've demonstrated themselves so feckless and faithless? Have you thought about that? What kind of a prize or a gift would that have even been, to take the scraps of worthlessness from some other woman's table? Or worse, bed, have them writhe on me and fake love for me like they've faked love for you all this time. Jesus. For someone who doesn't believe in Jesus, I say his name a lot. My apologies to you, Jesus. You suffered immensely for your fellow humanity too. And to what end? 2,000 years later, people are still evil and spiteful and petty and weak. Well, my psychiatrist calls me Boadicea for a reason. Boadicea stood against the Roman Empire and fought to her own death fearlessly. And if need be, so will I. Right, let us continue with our story. Bormann was trying to reach Admiral Karl Dönitz. Or this was the rumour, that he escaped through the Alps to Italy and that a submarine had carried him to South America. What they don't say here, and I find that interesting, is that there is a theory that Hitler and Eva Braun were also smuggled out of Germany and taken to Argentina. So I suspect there may be a fair bit of truth in that. The Germans, ironically, won the war. Look at the state of our planet now. Nothing much has changed. Still poisoning us, turning us against each other like verminous, treacherous rats. Except they even did one better. Got us all to poison our own selves, quite willingly. Like lemmings being pushed off a cliff. So you need to reclaim yourselves, people of Earth. Nattokinase, intermittent fasting. Get that thing out of you ASAP, otherwise you won't survive. You just won't, I'm telling you now. Right, 6 people vanished on or near Vermont's Long Trail between November 1945 and December 1950. The body of only one of them was found. The first disappearance was that of Middy Rivers, a 75-year-old deer hunter who knew the region of the trail near Mount Glastonbury very well. State police, soldiers, Boy Scouts and loyal residents combed the woods after he failed to return from a day's hunting on December 12, 1945, but to no avail. On a December day in 1946, Bennington College student Paula Weldon told her roommate that she was going for a walk. The last person to see the 18-year-old alive was a watchman at the local newspaper, who gave her directions to the long trail, despite a thorough search and nationwide publicity. No trace of Paula Weldon could be found, and rumours of a mad murderer began to spread. James Telford, the third victim, if that is the word, was last seen on the trail on December 1, 1949. Early in 1950, Frida Langer, who was described as an experienced woodswoman, disappeared while hiking the trail. Her body was found finally on May 12, 1951, in an open spot in the woods that was apparently overlooked in earlier searches. When Martha Jones disappeared on November 6, 1950, it was thought at first that she had run off to join her boyfriend in Virginia. When this proved not to be the case, a search was launched with no results. The last of the 6 was Frances Christman, who set out on December 3, 1950, to visit a friend 3 miles away. It was never seen again. If the 6 cases had no connection other than their location, confidence was at work. Dear Goddess. Coincidence was at work on a grand scale. If, on the other hand, there was a mad murder of the long trail, we will never know why the crimes began or ended. The Vermont forest has yielded no secrets. No doubt something wormed into that person's brain too. It happens. Perfectly sane, normal people can suddenly turn savage and psychopathic and go on serial killing sprees. It's a known thing in in the history of criminality. Why they begin and why they stop just as abruptly, no one knows. The law of the Bermuda Triangle, the area east of Florida, where ships and planes are said to disappear in numbers too large to be happenstance, grew with the loss of Flight 19 on December 5, 1945. 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale on a 320-mile navigation training exercise that should have taken them east, then north over Grand Bahama Island, then southwest, back to base. Leading Flight 19 was Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, one of 2 experienced crewmen aboard the planes. The 12 other pilots, radio men and gunners were all students in training. Less than 2 hours after the 2:10 p.m. takeoff, radio messages indicated that Taylor had become disoriented. Both my compasses are out. I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down, and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale. In fact, anything like the planned course should have put Flight 19 near Great Sail Cay, 200 miles northeast of the Florida Keys. For the next 2 hours, fragmentary radio contacts revealed Flight 19 flew chiefly north and east in the apparent belief that it was over the Gulf of Mexico and would soon encounter the west coast of Florida. One of the last transmissions from Taylor announced, "All planes close up tight will have to ditch unless landfall. When the first man gets down to 10 gallons, we will all land in the water together." One flying boat set out from Miami to search for the presumably ditched airman, but had to turn back when its antenna iced over. Jesus. Another took off from the Banana River Naval Air Station. Half an hour later, a tanker observed a burst of flames and investigated a patch of oil and debris where the flying boat must have crashed. As for Flight 19, a 5-day search of 250,000 square miles of ocean failed to discover any trace of it. Over the years, exaggeration and legend have made the story of Flight 19 even more puzzling than it was, embellishing it with hints of UFOs and alleged radio messages, such as, "Even the ocean doesn't look as it should," and "Don't come after me, it looks like..." Still, there are questions at the core that even the 400-page naval inquiry record could not answer. Why did both of Taylor's compasses fail shortly after they were checked out in the pre-flight inspection? Even though the northernmost Bahamas look much like the Florida Keys from the air, how did the airmen become convinced that the first leg of their flight had taken them so far south rather than east? All the evidence points to the conclusion that Flight 19 ran out of fuel and that its crews were unable to get into rafts before the ditched planes sank in rough water. But the evidence does not explain how their planned 2-hour training flight became a wandering 5-hour journey to nowhere. Cadet Richard Cox, 22-year-old sophomore at West Point, vanished on January 14, 1950. Cox had enlisted in the army in 1946 and served in occupied Germany. Upon entering the academy, he had become a long-distance runner and a better-than-average student. None of his comrades knew of any shadowy side to Cadet Cox's life. On January 7, 1950, he had a visitor who called himself George and said he had served in Germany with Cox. The two had dinner and drinks together. The next morning, Cox told friends that his visitor had spun morbid tales about bloody fighting and the murder of a German woman George had lived with. Nonetheless, a week later, when the visitor showed up again, Cox met with him and said they would meet for dinner. He didn't act apprehensive recalled Cox's roommate, just sort of disgusted. I guess he just figured it was an excuse to get out to eat at the Hotel Taya, adjacent to the academy. That night, Cadet Richard Cox disappeared. No one remembered seeing him leave West Point or dining at the hotel. Army investigators and the FBI were unable to make any headway in the long search that followed, although they pursued more than 1,000 potential leads. The academy grounds and the surrounding region were searched. Military records turned up no servicemen in Germany who could be identified with George. Unlike most missing persons whose police case files remain open, Richard Cox is officially and inexplicably AWOL, absent without leave. Father Henry Burinsky vanished on July 13, 1953. I've got a spirit hovering around me, begging me. It's coming as a message from a living person, which is odd. Begging me, please don't leave us. Please don't abandon us, Tanya. We need you. Well, I need to hear that in words and actions and intentions, not bullshit sent to me by your pissweak little ghosts. It's ridiculous, and I'm not owning that. I deserve to be treated with deep honour and deep respect, like a fucking queen. I will accept nothing less, from now until the rest of my days on earth. And thank you to my shaman friend who contacted this morning, because he, without me asking for his assistance, can actually see what's going on, reminded me to prioritise my own self. He's quite correct about that. Quite correct. Thank you, mon cher. A real man, not afraid to stand with me and fight by my side. A real man. And when I say fight, I'm talking about the spiritual war I find myself embroiled in recent months. It's just starting to reach its peak now, and it's going to be intense, people of Earth. Even if I die, I will take you all with me, my enemies. I did nothing to you, not one solitary thing. It's all in your mind. Father Henry Burinsky vanished on July 13, 1953, from his parish in a suburb of Bradford, England. Burinsky had made himself well known among Polish immigrants and refugees in England for his denunciation of the communist regime in post-war Poland. The apparent occasion of Burinsky's disappearance was a telephone call. Now this has come, I must go, he told his housekeeper enigmatically. Without gathering any of his papers or taking any of his possessions, he left the rectory and was observed a few minutes later, waiting on a street corner. Who was he waiting for, I wonder? One unproved theory is that some family or other connection in Poland had left Father Borynsky subject to pressure from the Polish communists, and that he had been taken to a Russian ship sailing for Leningrad. It was rumoured that there were 2 identified men on the passenger list, one of them the priest, and the other professional assassin. The British government later refused to respond to a parliamentary question about the Borynsky case, saying that disclosure of any facts would not be in the public interest. Although the captain and officers of the Joyita had often claimed she was unsinkable, a very stupid thing to refer to a ship or a boat as that, see also the Titanic, they and the passengers abandoned the vessel. Their story remains unknown. Here she is listing port side. It's very sad when a ship goes down, but then I come from. Let's see if I can re-honour our ships and boats. The small ship Joyita sailed from Apia in Western Samoa in early October 1955, bound for another island 270 miles away. More than a month later, she was found abandoned, with an awning stretched as if to collect rainwater. A broken pipe had caused flooding, but the cork-lined hull would have kept her afloat indefinitely. The radio and one of the twin engines had failed. Bloody bandages suggested an injury or perhaps a fight on board, but neither the captain, Dusty Miller, nor his crew and passengers were ever found to answer questions about the last voyage of the Joyita or Joyita or however the feck you want to pronounce that. The disappearance of the activist scholar Jesus Maria de Galindez in New York City on March 12, 1956, led to investigations that revealed a tangled international web. Galindez, a refugee first from Franco's Spain and then Rafael Trujillo's Dominican Republic. I feel like being a refugee from Australia myself. Where can I go where people treat me with basic bloody decency and respect, where I can be afforded some kind of protection? It's ridiculous, people of Earth. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Utterly absurdist. Was a teacher of Hispanic American history and politics at Columbia University. He was well known for speeches attacking Trujillo and had written a 750-page doctoral thesis documenting the dictator's crimes. Galindez disappeared on the way to the subway after an evening class at Columbia. 9 months later, a young American pilot by the name of Gerald Murphy vanished in the Dominican Republic. Local authorities said that Murphy had been killed in a quarrel with a Dominican citizen who subsequently hanged himself in jail. But inquiries pressed first by Murphy's family and then by the US State Department and finally by Life magazine led to a reconstruction in which Murphy had been hired to fly the kidnapped Galindez first from Long Island to Miami and then on to Trujillo's Island. Murphy later told acquaintances that on the night of March 12th, an ambulance had delivered a wealthy invalid to the Long Island airport, and there is no doubt that after the flight Murphy lived in unwontedly high style in the Dominican Republic. The Trujillo government denied any link between Galindez and Murphy, and their fate was still a mystery when Trujillo himself was assassinated in May 1961, bringing his 30-year tyranny to an end. A family visit was the last journey investment counsellor Bruce Campbell ever took. On April 14, 1959, he and his wife drove from their home in Massachusetts to see their son. They stopped at a motel in Jacksonville, Illinois, where Mrs. Campbell awoke to find her husband gone in his pajamas, leaving behind their car, money, and all his clothes. Campbell was never found. It's a bit odd, isn't it? I got off in his pajamas. Not likely. If you're going to run away, you'd take your money and your clothes at least. It's a bit odd. Since 1960, the offshore waters of a Pacific island, or one of the most hostile jungles in the world, claimed the life of Michael Rockefeller, the 23-year-old son of New York State's governor and later Vice President Nelson Rockefeller in November 1961. Michael Rockefeller, a Harvard graduate, waste of a good education there since he went missing, isn't it? It's a fucking tragedy. Had been seeking something romantic and adventurous before going to business school and becoming a banker. So he joined an expedition from Harvard's Peabody Museum to the jungles of Dutch New Guinea, where he spent 6 months helping to tape native chants. After a brief return to the United States, he went back to the jungle to seek native artifacts for the Museum of Primitive Art in New York, an institution sponsored and largely supported by the Rockefeller Foundation. I can tell you what he probably did wrong. He probably upset someone's gods by taking something that he should not have taken, and they disappeared him. They. Happens, people of Earth. Don't fuck with other people's gods or fetishes or representations of their gods. Just gave a lecture to that recently to a young man I met. Said he was having all sorts of curses and difficulties in his family because the old grandmother is Queen of Rarotonga and half the family are unbelievers or atheists, or I don't know what they've done, turned their back on their own traditions anyway, split up the family gods, thereby causing great offence to their ancestors, and now all hell's broken loose. I said, you need to go to those idiots, your cousins and uncles, and throw them a slab of beer because they're stupid and they won't realise. Buy back your gods off them, put them all together, keep them sacred, and do a cleansing ceremony to appease them and show that they're together again, that you will honour them according to your ancestral traditions, or the curse could lead to your death, my boy. He looked at me. I'll do just that, he said. I hope he does. Don't fucking separate the ancient tribal gods of ancient tribal peoples. Either willfully or out of ignorance. Not wise. Not wise. Anyway. On November 16, Rockefeller, a Dutch anthropologist named René Wassink, and two guides were travelling along the southern coast of Dutch New Guinea, aboard a catamaran, two dugout canoes lashed together, mounted with an outboard motor. A large tidal wave swept over the boat, tipping it over and leaving it to drift. The guides swam ashore and reported the accident, while the catamaran drifted 3 or 4 miles out to sea. Finally, Rockefeller decided to follow the guides, despite Wassink's warning of sharks and saltwater crocodiles. Taking a jerry can and an empty gasoline can as floats, he struck out to swim to shore. Many hours later, a search plane spotted and rescued the anthropologist, still clinging to the catamaran. Soon after, Nelson Rockefeller and Michael's twin sister Mary were on their way to the Pacific island. Dutch, Australian and native search parties were sent out to cover every square mile of offshore waters and go to all the coastal villages, offering large rewards for any word of the young American. But the only clue found was a floating gasoline can. Remembering that Rockefeller was a strong swimmer, some resident officials and missionaries were inclined to think that he reached shore and that he lost his life in the jungle. I think that's unlikely. He was probably taken by a crocodile. His fate will probably never be known. Michael Rockefeller, shown here on a river in Dutch New Guinea months before he disappeared, is believed to have drowned in an attempt to swim ashore from a drifting, overturned boat, but his death has never been proved. Harvard graduate. Proof that intelligence won't even save you sometimes. Just saying. It's ridiculous, people of Earth. Ridiculous. 3 Germans connected with Egypt's rocket program vanished from the Munich area in September 1962. Dr. Wolfgang Pilz and Professor Paul Gurka, both of whom worked at the Egyptian rocket plant in a Cairo suburb, dropped out of sight at about the same time as Dr. Heinz Krug, whose Stuttgart trading company had supplied parts for the rockets. Krug was last seen in Munich in the company of an Arab who called himself Mr. Saleh. Let me just shut the windows and door because I'm too hot before the work. Ow! That was my joints. Isn't it lovely? Getting old gracefully or disgracefully, as the case may be. There's the I always said that when the last pet died, being Charlie, there'd be nothing to hold me to this mortal coil anymore. So it's no accident that the spiritual attacks and little accidents, etc., have, escalated because that's probably the final outcome. And I'm okay with that. I'm done dealing with people who are false and superficial and fake love and lie to me that they love me when they're really out to get me on some level for whatever reason. It's inside their own mind. It's beyond evil. Beyond fucking evil. But it's not my first rodeo. I fought through other monstrosities, different faces, different names, same MO. And I'm tired. I'm done. I'm a bit sick of it, quite frankly. I wanted one thing out of life, and that was to be with a loving partner, which hasn't manifested because none of those men were available, and I didn't push it. Did not push that envelope. So whatever little game they were fantasizing about or playing with me, it's their game, not mine. I just did what I always do. Go dancing, live my best life, go home. Safely. As much as possible, safely. And the man that was meant for me would not have indulged in those vicious little, weird little spiritual games. And I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play. I've seen true heartfelt intentions, how it really is. And I'm quite done. And I will dance on Friday, as per usual. I will gift the gift that I made some weeks ago to my friend Luke, the drummer of Alter Egos, and my contract is completed. And so it is, and with peace in my heart, knowing that I came with only powerful and good intentions, and I'll leave with only powerful and good intentions. And anything over and beyond that, it's not for me to own. It's your mess, you clean it up in your backyard. whoever you are that decided that you would attack me for no fucking good reason, but you just could, like pulling wings off flies. Thought you'd have a bit of fun, practice your magic on somebody. Not good people of Earth that will rebound on you for fucking generations. So you better clean that up. Pull back on it, because I have called upon the wrath of God. A few days after the two had been spotted together, Krug's car was found abandoned. Many Egyptians believed that the Germans had been abducted by Israeli agents seeking to block the military progress of an enemy state. The fate of all three might as well have been another riddle of the Sphinx. Three airplanes and 8 passengers vanished over the Bermuda Triangle, a patch of ocean associated with a succession of perplexing and sinister disappearances in a single week in 1967. Checking something, people of Earth. Right. So, searchers turned up no floating debris for 2 of the planes. Debris from the 3rd plane was found, but the cause of the crash could not be determined. Sometime in early July 1969, Donald Crowhurst went overboard from his sailboat, the Teignmouth Electron, in mid-Atlantic. He had entered a round-the-world race sponsored by the Times of London with high hopes, although his newly built trimaran, named for its home port, and Crowhurst's failing marine electronics firm, was hardly ready for such a strenuous challenge when he started the race on October 31, 1968. Month after month, cabled messages and position reports indicated that Crowhurst was making good time on a voyage around Africa across the Indian and Pacific Oceans, and around Cape Horn at the tip of South America. In fact, he had fallen behind schedule in the first weeks of the voyage and decided to loiter in the South Atlantic while faking his messages and logbook. In a second, genuine logbook, he recorded his arguments with himself over what he was doing. By April 1969, Crowhurst seems to have decided to let the only other boat still in the race claim victory, so that nobody would look too closely at his own account. But on May 21, his competitor's ship sank near the Azores. Crowhurst found himself in an impossible position, for the publicity surrounding his widely anticipated victory would surely be too much for his story to withstand. His logbook became more incoherent, filled with rambling philosophical discourses and meditations on the sin of concealment. His last radio message was on June 30. On July 11, a British freighter found the Teignmouth Electron abandoned. I just read that and I didn't take any of it in. So I've almost finished this chapter and then I'll go and have a rest. It's like got to prioritise me, people there. On May 15, 1970, Edward and Stephania Andrews attended a trade association's cocktail party at the Chicago Sheraton Hotel. Both 63 years old, they were archetypal, solid citizens, respectively a bookkeeper and a credit investigator, with a comfortable home in suburban Arlington Heights. At the party, Edward Andrews complained of mild illness, ascribing it to hunger pangs. There were only hors d'oeuvres to eat. They went downstairs to the hotel garage, where the attendant noticed that Stephania seemed to be crying and that Andrews acted somewhat under the weather. As they drove out, he scraped an exit door with the car fender. No one ever saw Mr. and Mrs. Andrews again. Police theorised that Andrews might have driven off a bridge into the Chicago River, but dragging and metal detectors could not lead them to the car. Skyjacker Dan Cooper parachuted from a Northwest Airlines Boeing 727 into a rainy Thanksgiving night in 1971. Cooper had taken over the jetliner after it took off from Portland, Oregon, and ordered that it land at Seattle to pick up a parachute and $200,000 in cash. His demands were met and the plane took off again. After takeoff, Cooper sent the stewardess forward to the cockpit and used her intercom to repeat his instructions that the pilot hold the 727 at 200 miles per hour. When they were approximately over the Lewis River, Cooper opened the rear exit door and jumped without protective gear against the wind and freezing rain outside, but apparently confident. Over the years, a plastic notice sign from a 727's rear door and a parachute were found in the woods. Then, in 1980, some of the marked bills from Cooper's Hall were found in mud dredged from the Columbia River. That confirmed the belief in some quarters that Cooper had not survived his escape, that his skeleton lies somewhere underwater or in the deepest woods. But to others, captivated by Cooper's coolness and planning, he is a heroic scoundrel who deserves to be living well wherever he is today. Above is an artist's composite drawing of Dan Cooper, who hijacked a Boeing 727 top over Washington State in 1971. The map shows approximately where Cooper bailed out and where some of the ransom was found. Cooper has not been seen since. Two aging Japanese soldiers emerged from Pacific jungles in 1972 and 1974 to find the world almost unrecognisable since the end of their war a generation earlier. In late January 1972, Shoichi Yokoi was apprehended by fishermen on the island of Guam, where he and 9 comrades had hidden when American troops landed in 1944. The others had eventually died or given themselves up, but Yokoi had ignored a leaflet announcing his nation's surrender because, he said, we Japanese soldiers were told to prefer death to the disgrace of getting captured alive. Lieutenant Hiru Onoda held out 2 years longer, emerging from the Philippine jungles on March 10, 1974. Unlike Yokoi, he had never been informed that World War II was over. When asked why he had not come out before, Onoda said, I had not received the order. Both old soldiers were hailed as heroes when they returned to Japan. The Pacific conflict took in so many tiny islets, many of them still only rarely visited, that more of the Emperor's faithful troops may still appear. It's a bit like how many German soldiers went missing in the Russian front. Some defected and still alive somewhere in Russia and living as Russians. Guess you do what you have to do to survive, am I right? But there was a lot of that went on too. Families never finding where their sons, whether they'd fallen or just fucking been abducted or been taken prisoner or just defected. Sergeant Shoichi Yokoi of the Japanese Imperial Army as he looked in 1941 and as he appeared when he was captured in Guam in 1972. He had hidden in the jungle for 28 years rather than suffer the disgrace of surrender. How's that for the power of the Japanese education system to brainwash their own human population into such extreme submission and obedience as to literally hide rather than surrender for 28 fucking years. Jimmy Hoffa, President of the Teamsters Union from 1957 until he went to prison in 1967, disappeared on July 30, 1975. He had been paroled, some say, after a deal in which Union Vice President Frank Fitzsimmons assured the White House that Hoffa would not resume his office until 1980, the end of his prison term. According to this version, Hoffa was furious when he found out about the deal Fitzsimmons had made and was beginning to spill the beans about connections between the Union and organised crime. Well, that was very, very foolish indeed, was it not? Hoffa was at his summer home north of Detroit in 1975, and on the 30th he drove to a luncheon meeting with alleged mob leader Tony Jack Giacalone and Tony Provenzano, a Teamster who had been in prison with Hoffa. Apparently they stood him up, for several hours later he called home to see if they had left any message for him. His last call was to an old friend and business partner, Louis Lintot. The last witness to see him said that Hoffa was in the back seat of a car with several others, leaning forward to talk to the driver. When Hoffa did not return, a manhunt began. Authorities questioned their mob contacts, dug up cornfields, and broke through cement basement floors, searching for his body. Half a dozen books have connected the murder, for nobody believes Hoffa is still alive, to various aspects of the continuing corrupt relationship in which union pension funds have been mixed with the proceeds of gambling, prostitution, and illegal drugs. But a corpse, after all, is not as hard to dispose of as many people are inclined to believe, certainly not for professionals, and many of those Hoffa associated with were professionals at murder. The long drive between Miami, Florida and Scarsdale, New York was routine for Charles R. Roma and his wife, Catherine. The retired couple, both in their 70s, had spent the winter of 1980 in their Florida apartment, and on April 8th they started home. That afternoon they checked into a motel in Brunswick City, Georgia. A little later, a highway patrolman saw their black Lincoln Continental on the road. Perhaps they were going to a restaurant for dinner. If so, they never arrived. They and their car disappeared. 3 days later, finding the room had not been slept in, The motel management notified authorities. Baffled police could only guess that the roamers had gone off the road into a swamp, or that they had robbed and killed. Other than luggage in a motel room or a fleeting glimpse of their car, there were no clues. Said their son, "It's incredible that two people can totally disappear." Incredible, but true. Right, thus concludes today's readings of Even Date. The next chapter is about monsters. Ooh, I shall enjoy reading that, I think. Unknown creatures of monstrous size have been seen and occasionally photographed in various seas, lakes, and mountainous regions of the world. Nessie and the abominable snowman have been described so often that they have almost become household words. As for ghosts, the countless numbers of sober citizens who have seen or heard what they could only define as a spectral presence suggest that there must be some kind of etheric manifestation beyond our understanding. Those who have encountered apparitions are convinced this is so, and never to have seen one is hardly proof that they do not exist. Well, I was gifted the astonishing presence beside my bed of Sir James Douglas, Black Douglas, back in late October 2018. And I don't know why that was to this day, but since I have Scottish ancestry, he may have come to be a protector. So I'm quite certain that if I needed to call upon him, which I don't do lightly, don't like to disturb the dead with matters of triviality, he would stand by my side, proud and fierce and protective as when he might have been alive. And why is that, people of Earth? Because by and large, I'm a good woman who does no one any harm, unless you fuck with me, and then it's all out war. But you start it, it'll get finished. If not by me, then by my spirit, people. Just saying. And I'm okay with that. Perfectly okay with that. It's only fair. And harm ye none, do what thou willest, but don't attack people whose only modus operandi is to laugh and dance and have a modicum of happiness. Seriously. On that note, I bid you all goodbye. Have a beautiful day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the space-time continuum. I'll be back perhaps tomorrow with the next chapter on monsters. Having survived my own familial monsters, it's a subject that I can completely resonate with. For more reasons than one, darlings. Oh, smallest violin, greatest violin. Ultimately, whatever happens, happens for a reason, and serves only to reveal true hearts and minds and show me who the liars and the fakes truly are. Sad but true. Sad